Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We got playoff picks for you today. It's our second round of playoff picks in 2025. We did the first round in March, Bill, before spring practice. And now this is our post-spring practice round, post-spring portal round. What have we changed our minds on? And we also have, since we did them, this came out like last week, I think sometime is when you saw them, right? We have the odds to make the playoff, which are the best odds that these sports books can offer. Because when you're trying to pick a national champion, it's like, okay, well, like there's really only 6 teams that people are going to bet on for that. And win totals are very helpful and fun, but making the playoff is a thing where there's going to be underdogs who make the playoff, Bill. So we're going to talk about the odds, what we think of the odds, what that tells us about the group of playoff contenders, and then we're going to each pick our 12 teams.
Yeah, I'm glad that I was unsure when those playoff odds came out last year. I feel like maybe they're out a little earlier right now than they were at this point last year, but I was happy to see them. Look, we could have made our playoff picks without them, but it's nice to have them as a bit of a guide, I think. Also, by the way, for anyone who's at all interested in betting on, and I'm not giving you betting advice, the odds are drastically different on DraftKings compared to FanDuel, which I thought was kind of strange. So make sure you're shopping around if you're looking to bet on playoff odds.
Also, KOTN Showdown, middle part of the show, Boston College, Pitt. Bill is Boston College. I'm Pitt. We will do that breakdown, and then what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking. At the end of the show, I accomplished something that I would like to bring here to Whatcha this week. And I also would like to say, I'm having an internet tech come to my house for the second time in 5 days this afternoon. And we know at times when you're watching, like I can get a little fuzzy, I can get a little pixelated. I'm spending $3.1 million a month on internet to get the best that I can get in my house. And a tech lives in my guest bedroom now. So like, we're doing the best we can. And I'm putting a smiley face on this. The things that I say to internet chat robots about my internet connection, you don't want to, I don't know if you can go to jail, Bill, for saying mean things to an internet robot, but if you could, I am going to jail.
I mean, if you can't curse out a robot, then what's the point of even being around? You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to let that out someplace.
Yeah, we got to let it out. Okay. Yeah. Let's do our playoff picks, but let's talk about these odds first, because I think one of the things that's interesting is we try to talk about teams that are going to make the playoff. And again, this is not a betting show. When we do betting, we bring in our great friend, Tyler Shoemaker, to like make us educated about betting. But this provides context. And so, Bill, as we think about our playoff picks, there are 8 teams. Oh, and this is the other thing. So you use the DraftKings odds when you were like talking about the playoff favorites and stuff, right? Why did you go to DraftKings?
Because I was looking on FanDuel on Monday while I was in the Fort Lauderdale airport, and I noticed that Minnesota in particular, there were no odds for Minnesota. So I was like, oh, let me flip over to DraftKings, and then DraftKings had everybody. So it turns out that FanDuel was missing a couple teams until you bullied them into having everybody.
So I was going through the 68 power conference teams, and I was making a spreadsheet of all the playoff odds, sortable spreadsheet. Look at me. I'm a modern boy. And I kept getting 67 teams, and I was like, who am I missing? And then I realized Minnesota wasn't on there. So I got on the support chat with FanDuel. I said, why aren't there Minnesota odds? They said, well, not every team is loaded. I said, that's false. Every SEC team, every Big 12 team, every ACC team, 17 of the 18 Big 10 teams are in there. It's an oversight by you. And I expect Minnesota's odds to be up there by the end of the day. And they said, we will forward your request. And this was yesterday. And 2 hours later, Minnesota's playoff odds were up there.
That's
so
right.
There's a lot of things that I'm terrible at. I'm not a human boy. I'm not an adult man in a lot of ways. But when I sniff out the slightest bit of possible disrespect, purposeful or otherwise, when it comes to Northern college football, I spring into action.
Yeah. Don't let anybody tell you that KOTN doesn't have influence, by the way. How about that? Getting it changed almost immediately. Impressive.
14-1 for Minnesota to make the playoff. Yeah. And by the way, I was
initially mad. I thought they weren't there because like their odds were like 8,000 to 1, or like they didn't put them there because their odds were too low. So I'm glad case.
And then you're like, I'm going to hammer Minnesota when those odds came out. They were like 14-1. It's like, actually, they kind of respect them. There's no money to be made there.
Right.
Also would just like to point out our great friend, Stephen Godfrey, friend of the show, wrote a preview story for the Athlon College Football Magazine about of the power structure in college football. And if you go get that Athlon preview magazine, you might find some Kings of the North quotes in that story, Bill Landis.
You actually, so you've jumped the gun for me on what you're thinking, because it's okay, it's fine. I was reading, I have my Athlon right here. I was reading it on the flight down to Florida over the weekend, and I'm reading the story by Godfrey, and I'm like 4 paragraphs in, and I'm getting mad. Like, I'm angry. I'm like, this guy's stealing our thing. I can't believe this is what he wrote for Athlon. And then I get to the first quote, and it's from you. I was like, oh, okay. I'm not angry now. This is KOTN promotion. This is not KOTN stolen valor from Stephen Godfrey. So it was cool. It was cool to see that in there. Yeah.
I think the first quote is me calling Bama a fraud or something. I don't know.
You came out pretty hot. Yeah.
So anyway, well, I'm glad you're thinking about that. We just the word is spreading. Let's talk about our playoff picks. 8 odds-on teams, Bill, that are minus money, which just means like they're right. If you bet $5 on this team to make the playoff, there's only 12 spots out of 36 teams now? 136 teams in FBS college football, only 12 spots. If you bet $5, you're not even going to get $5 back. It's less, like it's minus odds, right? Yeah. What do we think of these 8 odds-on favorites? Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson. First of all, does 8 obvious candidates in the eyes of the bookmakers, the eyes of the general public, that's 8 of the 12 spots that are like, well, those seem pretty wrapped up. That seems like a lot to me. And in this sport of opportunity, what do we think of the preseason perception of like, well, I don't know, 2/3 of the spots are kind of taken already?
Yeah, it definitely flies in the face of anyone, myself included, who sometimes touts the inclusivity of an expanded playoff and the beauty of increased access for everybody. It's like, oh, I guess maybe that's not the case. I was trying to go back and look. I don't know if you found it. How many teams were in this position going into the last season? I can't imagine there were 8. And maybe part of this is influenced by now having gone through it for a year. We have a better understanding of how the process works. So I don't know. Individually, I think most of these teams make sense to me. Collectively, 8 certainly feels like a lot, and almost like, the exercise of projecting who's going to make the playoff feels like a somewhat boring endeavor, because it's like, oh, well, most of the field is kind of already spoken for, which, like, I understand is not reality. Like, this is just based on betting markets and, historically how people tend to wager on teams. But it is a little jarring to see that many teams considered like odds-on favorites to make the playoff.
Yeah, and it's like, what is, and so again, we're talking, that's 8 of the 12, and there's no Big 12 team in there. So there's got to be a Big 12 champ. So that's 9 of the 12 spots that would be taken up if the 8 make it and the Big 12 champ. And then there's a G5 team. So it's 10 of the 12 spots. Mm-hmm. So 10 of the 12 spots are accounted for. And everybody else is racing. So we got everybody in the Big 12 is racing for 1 spot. Everybody in the G5 is racing for 1 spot. And then everybody else who doesn't win the Big 12 or the ACC and the Big 10 and the SEC, they're racing for 2 spots. Not really. But from this perception standpoint, the thing that, and I think we sort of, people as college football fans have to decide this. You talk about hockey sometimes on here. And when we, and ask KOTN@gmail.com. I don't know if we're going to have time. We're not going to have time to get to a ton of those today. We're going to have a show in the near future where we dig into to a lot of those again. I love reading the askkotn@gmail.com emails. We love your questions. We love your comments. We love when something that we say like hits something with you a little bit. I just want to tell you that my daughter the other day said, Landis is right. Playoff hockey is awesome. So Bill, you're changing lives.
It's the best, man. And the first 2 games in the Stanley Cup Finals were awesome. The third game, not so much, but yeah, I think it is, short of the World Cup, maybe the best sporting sort of event that people can tune into.
But my point there, neither Florida nor Edmonton in the NHL were the top points getters during the regular season, right? They didn't even win their divisions because they weren't like all the 1 seeds lost in the quarterfinals or whatever. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I think I don't know. Historically, I think the team that wins the President's Trophy, which is the team that has the most points in the regular season, does not do all that well in the playoffs. Yeah.
So then the question becomes, as we think about it for college football, is there anybody in the NHL who's upset or complaining that Florida and Edmonton, they were whatever they were, the 3rd and the 6th best regular season teams. But man, now they're in the Stanley Cup. Like so many teams get in the playoff. I can't believe those 2 teams are in. Or are people like, it's a rematch?
Mm-hmm.
They're clearly great. They didn't have to be perfect or 100% on point because the NHL could do a thing where they just say, okay, we'll take the top 4 points getters and that's it. 4 teams make the playoff and then we go, right? Yeah. But I think like it's established, right? It's established in the NHL, in sports like that. Nobody's mad that it's not teams that won their division. So then when we think about 8 teams like this, because this is the part that I think college football fans, it's a personal decision. But the idea that the reason that these 8 teams are such odds-on favorites to make it is because they have so much wiggle room. And we've talked about this a lot of times, because I think you can look at all 8 teams that we mentioned and say they're probably guaranteed in at 10-2.
Yes.
And that's the thing. So then it's like, well, I don't want a 10-2 Georgia in. I don't want a 10-2 Oregon or a 10-2 Ohio State or a 10-2 Notre Dame in. I don't want that. I want them to have to prove it to a higher level during the regular season. Or do we think as college football fans, well, Georgia has great players. Clemson has great players. I kind of want to see Cade Klubnik in the playoff again. Notre Dame, if their defense stays healthy, like even if they stumble once or twice, I want to see them take a shot at this. Ohio State, they have a young quarterback. They'll grow into it. Oregon, first-time starter quarterback. They'll grow into it. If they're playing awesome in November, I don't want them. I'm fine that they maybe had 2 losses in September and October, but now they're here. And when we get to the games, when we get to the playoff, it's going to be awesome. And then if we accept that, then I think you can look at 8 odds-on favorites, and maybe a bunch of them are going to make it. And there still is room for the underdog stories for SMU and Indiana and teams like that. So collectively as college football fans, individually as college football fans, do we look at teams that are sort of, quote, guaranteed to make it? And do we get excited about super talented blue bloods banging heads in a 12-team playoff? Or do we get mad that those teams have so many opportunities to slide in as a 9 seed now?
That's a good question. I don't know. We probably need more of just going through this for people to like to really kind of put themselves on either side of that. I would say personally, like I look at that group of 8 teams like, yeah, I want to see those teams play each other. So, and I like some of them we're going to see during the regular season. I understand that. So I don't know. Like I guess it can be a little frustrating. If you're someone who thinks like the expansion of the playoff is still just going to yield like sort of the same results in the end. So what's the point of having an expanded playoff? I don't really, ascribe to that kind of line of thinking. So I see this group and just kind of get fired up of like, this would be a heck of a playoff field. And then there's still like a spot or 2 left for a team to surprise you. Like, and I actually think that's not a bad recipe for a college football postseason.
All right. I want to look at my spreadsheet now. The smallest, most basic things make me happy because I am really not a human boy. And it's like I put 68 teams in a sheet, and then I went to the column where you click ascending or descending, and then I can look at like the odds a certain way. And I feel like I landed a man on the moon. So
nice. Congratulations.
I'm a simple man. It blows your mind how simple I am sometimes, right?
I'm sometimes when I'm working with a spreadsheet and I look at that option to do ascending or descending, the amount of time that I spend trying to figure out which is the right one is a really humbling experience.
Oh, anything. Well, but I think I hope kids still learn this about math and that kind of thing in school. You just try it one way, and if the answer doesn't make sense, it must be the other way.
Right.
So if you click the thing and it's like, well, I guess Purdue is the odds-on favorite to make the college football playoff, and you think, nope, I hit it the wrong way.
Right.
Then you learned. Top 19 teams by playoff odds to make the playoff. Top 19 teams. The breakdown. 10 from the SEC, 4 from the ACC, 4 from the Big Ten, 1 Notre Dame. 13 South, 5 North, 1 Border. Those are the 19 favorites to make the playoff. Is 13 South, 5 North, 1 Border? Bill, I asked you this. We do pre-show meetings. I asked you this. Should this fill me and us and our audience with the white hot rage of disrespect? Or is this just a money-making opportunity because public perception and therefore betting lines have not caught up with the reality that the North is as good as the South? Because 13-5 seems like kind of a big difference, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't view that as a reflection of how people perceive the quality in the North or the South necessarily. I think, and I agree with it. Like, I think it's true that the best teams in the North are more clearly defined and more clearly sort of separate from whatever that next tier is, what you want to call it. And I don't think that's the case in the South, especially in the SEC. It goes back a little bit, I guess, to the depth conversation we were having a couple of weeks ago. And I guess in some respects, this maybe highlights the fact, or at least if you wanted to make the argument that the SEC is deeper than the Big Ten, this would get you there. I more view it as not so much people thinking teams like whatever Indiana and Illinois, neither of which are part of that top 19, are bad. It's just that like the gap between them and the best teams in the North is much wider than the gap between like a Georgia and South Carolina.
Which again goes sort of back to the show we had about SEC versus Big Ten, depth versus elite, and the perception of if the gap is smaller, what does that mean? And there was a time when the SEC gap was bigger and then everybody loved the SEC. And now it might be that the Big Ten and the Northern gap is bigger and still everybody loves the SEC. Filled with white hot rage. Read about it in Athlon Sports. White hot rage. That would have been the cover. The North's white hot rage. You make your playoff picks?
Sure. Mine are weird.
Do you think we are not typically a group of 5 show? Do you think the race for the group of 5 playoff spot is a show that we should do a focus on between now and August? Like do a big segment on that, on all the machinations around schedule, quarterback, winning big games, not having letdowns. Is Boise State just like the default group of 5 from here to eternity? What would a MAC team have to do? What would an American team have to do? Right? Is that an interesting show?
I think that's maybe worth diving into a little more, because that there, especially if you want to like talk about the MAC and like Boise is in the North. Like I think we're going to brush on it here a little bit with some of our picks, but yes, I do think it's worth maybe diving into a little deeper, because if you look at the odds tell you that it's Boise State and no one else is worth considering. So,
right.
Is that actually reality? I don't know.
And I do think one of the things that I think we'll establish here, and this is the thing that makes me frustrated with SEC strength of schedule conversations, and our frustration with Greg Sankey and the SEC has been explained many times on this show. I think there is very clearly, we all think we see it. It's not thinking, it's seeing. The SEC has a 1-game edge when it comes to the College Football Playoff Committee, thanks to their general schedule strength. That for the most part, a 10-2 SEC team, a generic 10-2 SEC team versus a generic 11-1 team anywhere else is viewed equally. A generic 9-3 SEC team and a generic 10-2 anybody else team is viewed equally. The problem last year is Indiana was 11-1, and everybody else in the SEC Indiana might have been compared to was 9-3. And the other problem was SMU was a 2-loss team. That's the second team that Greg Sankey compares about, but their second loss was in a conference championship game. And last year especially, but generally the committee has said we're not going to penalize you for losing in a conference championship game. So that second loss by SMU is not a full loss. So it's still 3-2. It's not 3-2. It's 3-1.5. So the SEC in schedule strength arguments lost 3-1 and 3-1.5. They don't lose 3 losses to 2 losses arguments. They win those arguments, but that's not enough for them. This is why it relates to Boise State. Are we going to be at a point where Boise State is like the SEC and every other group of 5 team is everybody else, where Boise State has a 1-game lead? And that if Boise State goes 11-1, you have to be undefeated if you are another group of 5 team to have a chance to get in, and you still might not get in ahead of Boise State. And then if you really want to make sure you're in, go undefeated in the MAC or the American or something like that. And Boise State, hope Boise State goes 10-2. Do you think that could be where we shake out on here? Because Boise State right now is the Saban Bama of the group of 5. Are they not? They just lost Ashton Genty. Yeah. And everybody's like, they're definitely going to make it again.
It feels that way right now. I guess I could see, and the Mountain West will be perceived as even strong, or whatever it's going to be, the Pac-12 Mountain West Frankenstein thing they're making, will be perceived, I think, as the strongest G5 league, and Boise State will be a part of that. So yeah, they do feel a little bit inevitable. I don't know what would shake them out of that unless a team, maybe like in the American, just starts spending a lot of money to fortify their roster. A team like a Memphis or a Tulane or like a South Florida kind of feel like they're hovering there, but they're not there yet. So yeah, I for the time being, I think Boise State probably should be thought of that way. Now, when I see my playoff picks, maybe I'll wonder why I said that. But yeah. So
neither of us has Boise in the G5 spot in this iteration of our playoff picks. Also, we talked about Boise State, South Florida, week 1, G5 banger, right? Really matters. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize. I think Tulane is the favorite in the American by the betting odds. Is that correct? I think that's correct.
I think that is correct. Yes.
So really, really matters. Week 1 banger, Northwestern at Tulane. That's going to really matter in the playoff conversation if Tulane is like a real contender in there, because if you beat a Big Ten team, that's really helpful. And if you lose to Northwestern, then you are already behind the 8 ball in that race in like a very real way. So how about that? August 30th.
Tulane will be favored in that game, right?
And it's Brendan Sullivan, right? Former Northwestern quarterbacking Tulane if he wins that job. So I mean, Tulane's at home. I would say, yeah, Tulane's probably a 6.5 point favorite in that game. Probably, I think the odds for that game are probably out by now. I don't know that we have to do that right now. Do you want to do 25 minutes on Tulane Northwestern at some point this offseason? Is that what our audience wants? I think the answer could be yes. All right, let's do
Tulane, by the way, just what we're talking about. They play Northwestern, Duke, and Ole Miss. They have 3 Power 5 games.
Oh,
3 Power 4 games.
Oh, yeah. So that's one of those things. There's great opportunity there for Tulane. But if they lose 2 of those 3, are they dead? Mm-hmm. They have to win. Do they have to win? They have to go 2-1 in those Power 4 games to have a chance and then run the table? Like the G5,
I mean, a G5 team's not going to get in. I don't think they're going to get in with 9 wins. So probably, yeah.
Yeah, unless everybody in the G5 has 9 wins. So this is like if you crave the old college football world of you have no wiggle room in the regular season. And again, that we just lived in a sport where it was like, I think this team's going to be really good this year. And then they lost in week 3 and you're like, well, that's it. 11-1's no way are they getting in. No way. It's 2 teams get in for the BCS. They're dead. Oh, well. And everybody was like, I love this.
Yeah.
What? I love when great teams are eliminated in week 3. If that's what you want, follow the G5 race. We have a version of that.
Yeah.
South Florida, Boise State, week 1 is a play-in game for the playoff. In week 1.
I love it.
All right. Let's make your playoff picks. Why don't we just show the graphic and you can just run through 1 through 12 and then we'll talk it out.
All right, here we go. Here it is. My updated playoff picks. Number 1, I have Texas. Number 2, I have Penn State. Those are my SEC and Big Ten champs. 3, I have Notre Dame, and I want to have a conversation about how to view Notre Dame in the straight seeding world. 4, I have Clemson. 5, I have Ohio State. 6, Kansas State. 7, Florida. 8, Alabama. 9, Oregon. 10, Baylor. Here's a weird one. Duke at number 11. And then number 12, the Dukes of James Madison. So I'll run through them again one more time. Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, Kansas State, Florida, Alabama, Oregon, Baylor, Duke, and James Madison.
My God. Guess what time it is? Oh, my God. No dogs.
No dogs.
No dogs. Landis ain't got no dogs in his bracket. That tastes good.
Now I will say, I was like, you run through and like you do the schedule thing, and like I think this team's going to finish with this record while you're trying to do this. So
Yes.
so I had Georgia at 9-3. Like a 9-3 Georgia can definitely make the playoff. I just don't have them in. Because I have them losing to sort of like the right other SEC teams, I think, to keep them out. But 9-3 Georgia playoff possibility is very real.
And that's the test. And I think as we talk about those 8 odds-on favorites, I think I could see who can make it at 9 and the anatomy of a 9-3 playoff team actually is a good show. I think we can actually do that. And I think the shorthand on that is because we had a Bama test run last year, and how you get to 9-3 matters. So not all 9-3s are created equal. Although, frankly, Bama had kind of the version of the 9-3 that you want. Because I do think a 9-3 generally we beat a bunch of mediocre teams and then we lost everybody good we played. That is a less compelling 9-3 than we beat Georgia and then we lost to some goofy teams. So the goofy losses, but we saw how much when you start stockpiling, as we learn playoff lessons, one goofy loss you can survive, Northern Illinois, multiple goofy losses will take you down, as we saw in the SEC last year. So the anatomy of a 9-3 team, I think the shorthand is the 2 teams that could withstand it the best, given their schedule most of the time, are Georgia and Ohio State. Penn State this year playing both Oregon and Ohio State. I'm curious about that. Their non-conference schedule strength is not great. So like that would be a very interesting test case. And then of course it matters. The context of everybody else matters. But did it make you feel good on the inside? Did you get warm feelings when you left Georgia out of your bracket?
Yeah, it felt pretty good. I when I finalized it, I was like, Doug's gonna like this, and that made me happy. Like making you proud made me happy. So, yeah, I did it with a little bit of a knot in my stomach, understanding that like if what I have created here actually becomes reality, the conversation about 9-3 Georgia getting into the playoff is going to be utterly nauseating. But we'll handle that when we get to it, I guess.
I actually would expect I would watch ESPN today and the rest of the week. Anybody in KOTN Nation, they might start today. They might start the case for Georgia to make the playoff as a 9-3 team because they heard about Landis's bracket.
Yeah.
So
I also have them losing to Georgia Tech in this prediction, so that should be fun.
That's a ridiculous pick. I mean, come on. They easily handled Georgia Tech in 9 overtimes last year. So your SEC teams, you have 3 SEC teams: Texas, Florida, Alabama.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
I don't want to get into mine yet, but like I think like Texas, I don't know if there's something in our DNA that just like Texas is new to the SEC, so they don't carry as much baggage. Or I don't know if it's that we just think Steve Sarkisian is good. We think they have a depth of talent in the trenches on both sides of the ball. We think Arch Manning is going to step up and CJ Baxter is going to come back healthy. That like when I start doing this stuff and I'm like, oh man, I think Bama and Georgia both suck now. I think to myself, I think Texas is good. Is that what you think?
Yeah.
I think Texas is good.
Yeah, I think Texas is good. I don't harbor the same feelings for Texas that I do for like Georgia and Alabama and basically everybody else in the SEC. And it also brings me joy. I think I've said this before. It brings me joy that the SEC added Texas and Oklahoma, and like the tenor when they did it was like, we're doing you a huge favor. Like, can you believe we're giving you this opportunity? And then Texas shows up and is immediately the best team in the conference. I like that.
Yeah. So I think I'm not going to give anything away. Do you think a Texas playoff assumption? They are one of the 8 teams. They are the 3rd best odds behind Ohio State and Penn State to make the playoff. Do you think a Texas playoff assumption? They open at Ohio State. They do play at Georgia. So that's like two games that are as difficult a game as you can play in the country, right? Yeah. At Georgia and at Ohio State. What's more difficult than playing at Georgia and at Ohio State?
Yeah, I don't think anything.
10-2 with those 2 losses, no doubt in. Correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then how scary does it get for them of they lose 2, and are there realistic losses elsewhere on the schedule? And now if they're 9-3 with losses to Georgia, Ohio State, and to somebody else, are they still very strongly in, or are they maybe in trouble?
I don't know that they're like, if I'm an SEC team, because I'm envisioning something similar to last year. Like I want to be above the 9-3 fray if I'm in the SEC. Like I don't want to put myself in that group and then welcome all the funky comparisons and tiebreakers and all that stuff. So I would not feel comfortable if I'm any 9-3 SEC team. Not to say the one won't get in. I think like I said, Georgia, Texas would have pretty compelling cases at 9-3 still. But 10-2, yeah, because like 10-2 Texas can still go to Atlanta, right? Like 10-2 Texas with one SEC loss and a loss to Ohio State is probably playing for the SEC championship still. So I would feel great about that. But yeah, tack on that extra conference loss, then you're just inviting a world of possibilities you'd rather not be a part of.
Okay, so you have 7 of the 8 odds-on favorites in your bracket. Mm-hmm. You have Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, Oregon, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson. You do not have Georgia. You have Kansas State and Baylor from the Big 12. Briefly, why do you have those teams in?
Yeah, I'm looking that's a switch for me because my initial playoff rankings, my Big 12 teams were Arizona State and BYU. Part of the BYU thing is like I don't know what's going to happen with Jake Retzlaff in that situation, but that was enough. Like it was enough for me to sort of like back off and wait and see what's gonna go on with BYU. I kind of took the same approach with Michigan. There's a cluster of teams that I view at the top of the Big 12 that when we do this again, those 2 teams might be different. Like it's Arizona State, it's BYU, it's Baylor, it's Kansas State, it's Utah, and like maybe Texas Tech. And
do you view Iowa State there? Iowa State's in there from an odd standpoint, but I'm a little circumspect.
No, I don't think so. I would have them maybe like the next rung down.
Okay.
So I was just sort of like going through and playing out the schedule. And there's like a bunch of coin flip games in there, and the way that I decided I thought those were going to go in June led me to those 2 teams. It's not like I'm not planting my flag on either necessarily. I feel probably stronger by like the week or whatever as we get closer to the season that like Kansas State is going to like very much be in that mix, but like otherwise I don't have a great handle on what I think that race would look like. But I think Baylor's got an opportunity, just like 4 or 5 other teams in the Big 12, to put together like a 10 win season that would get them to the Big 12 championship.
And then Duke and the Dukes. Duke is your 11 seed, James Madison as your 12 seed. Might be alone on that one. Out of the world of college football, but I like it. Duke has some interesting games.
I've seen some James Madison. I'm less alone on that one. I think James Madison plays an interesting game against Louisville, and I think we'll probably run through the Sun Belt without losing. And like I found myself asking the question, sort of how many games does Boise State have to lose for any other G5 team, especially like a Sun Belt team or a MAC team, to surpass them? And I think maybe the answer is 2, which I could see Boise State losing. And then if James Madison is unbeaten with a win over a Power 4 team, I think they would get over that. And I like their coach, Bob Chesney. They brought in Matthew Sluka as one of their potential starting quarterbacks there. I just, it's a good program that wins a lot. Duke was more of like a schedule thing. I think they got like a nice shake in the ACC in terms of who they have to play this year. They have to play Clemson, but they don't play a lot of the other teams. Like they don't play Miami, Louisville, or SMU, which like are the other teams people consider to be near the top. So I was just like kind of going through, and like I didn't go through say like I'm making playoff picks, I'm putting Duke in. I just like gamed out the ACC schedule, and then I had Duke winning 11 games.
Yeah,
kind of based on the way the schedule broke out.
That includes
Illinois, which is like a banger of a preseason or non-conference game that we have not discussed.
Week 2.
Duke went 9-4. Duke went 9-4 last year. Had a pretty good defense in the ACC. I think they have a better defense this year, and they added Darian Mensah at quarterback from Tulane, who I think is very good.
For $1 million,
for $3 million,
whatever they paid.
Yeah. And I like Manny Diaz too. So I think there are 2 teams in the ACC that are interesting to me: are Duke and Georgia Tech. Especially Georgia Tech, if Haynes King can stay healthy. So like going through it, like both those teams sort of piqued my interest. and I kind of rolled with Duke there. So I have 3 Big Ten, 3 SEC, 2 ACC, and 2 Big 12. I could certainly see a scenario where the ACC only gets one team, but I only had Duke as I went through it, like losing to Clemson in the regular season and then losing to Clemson again in the ACC championship.
So it's Indiana. It's the Indiana path of
yes,
you beat everybody, you lose to the best team you play. That's a playoff team, and then you're sitting there at 11-1, and you see what happens. But they would have if Illinois is as competitive as we think they're going to be, they would maybe even have a better win than any that Indiana had last year. So I think we talked about this earlier. Like looking for your Indiana is a very interesting way to do that, and Duke as your Indiana is a little spicy, but not impossible at all. Not at all.
I was looking at, so like I when I was making my spreadsheet, I included in there like the strength of schedule from Bill Connolly's updated SP Plus rankings after spring football, and Duke's strength of schedule is 60th, which is like not all that daunting. And the power conference teams who had like 1,500 or better odds of making the playoff, who have easier schedules than them, like a couple of teams in the Big 12 and like UNC, who I don't think is for real, and Iowa, who I don't like, is interesting maybe. But I just thought like that jumped out to me a little bit. It's like, I think a good team that was good last year that seems to be ascending, that plays an easy schedule, I think could surprise some people.
Yeah. Florida. So the one thing, if you start going to the SEC and you go Texas for sure, then you got Bama and Georgia. And I think there's enough questions about both to maybe have an instinct to say, I'm not taking both. I'm taking one. And then you start looking for somebody else or maybe 2 other people in the SEC. And now you're just wading through that mishmash, right, of there's 10 teams in the top 19 and you can find anybody.
Yeah.
DJ Lagway, injury stuff. We don't spend time on our show diving into every little bit of his injury situation, but he is back throwing. Is that an assumption that he's going to be healthy and then also be very good, and away Florida goes?
Yeah, I wanted to put Florida in my initial playoff projections that we did in March, but at the time, DJ Lagway wasn't throwing, and there was just a lot of secrecy around that was alarming. And it seems like we're past that now, so that made me comfortable doing it. Their schedule's incredibly tough, as it was last year. They were like a really difficult stretch to navigate kind of early on in the season. There's a 4-game stretch where they play at LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, and at Texas A&M. So could certainly lose all 4 of those games. As I went through it, I projected them to split those 4 games and then win the rest of them. So I have them at 10 wins and like playing in the SEC championship against Texas.
Okay. All right. Those are your playoff picks. You, in the end, again, you switched off of. So we don't just want to do this willy-nilly crazy, but evolution of thinking is something that I think is interesting and matters. So what we did last year, what the goal is this year, is you kind of do a first blush when the season ends. We did it in March this year. These are our playoff teams as we're thinking now. Then you do another one after spring football, after the spring portal, which is what this is. Then you do your real playoff picks before the season starts, where you put your money where your mouth is and you pick not just the 12, but who's going to win the national championship. You do the whole bracket. And then last year we did like another round at the end of September and another round at the end of October of like as you go through. And the point, we talked about this last time in March, is I was as good in my first picks as I was in November. That sometimes like your first instinct of like, well, there's who I think is going to be good. And then you get into the season and goofy things happen and you change your mind and then things kind of work themselves out. And it's like, well, if you thought Notre Dame was going to be good and then Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois and you changed your mind, then it was like, no, they wound up where you thought they were going to be to begin with. It's not that we're smart, Landis. It's that I do think when we live in this world of college football where you have 8 odds-on favorites, and I've seen the discussion in the YouTube chat, and I do think it's interesting. Do you think it might be 5 of the 8? Do you think it might be 6 of the 8? I mean, it's not going to be 8 of the 8. You and I both have 7 of the 8 in. It's not going to go 8 for odds-on favorites, but you're also almost certainly not going to go 2 or 3 for 8. right?
I don't think so.
And
No, I
so
don't
now
think so.
you're in a, well, I feel like if you just pick a lot of them, you can lock down 5 or 6 playoff teams pretty easily.
You can, yeah. And it's interesting, like I think the one team of that group, maybe with the exception of Georgia, because we have to be true to who we are, that we've sort of expressed the most, I don't know, like curiosity about like what exactly the season might look like. Could there be like even the slightest bit of a step back? Is Oregon. But then you sort of look at Oregon's schedule and it's like, it's hard to find a third loss. I don't know, that, like you really feel convicted about on Oregon's schedule. And if that's another team that like if they're 10-2, they're in. So and that's the case with a lot of these teams. It's like I think because of how compacted the SEC is, you can convince yourself that a Georgia and Alabama can certainly catch a third loss. But aside from those two, I don't know that you can with the other teams.
Last thing on yours, 3-3-2-2. 3 Big Ten, 3 SEC, 2 ACC, 2 Big 12. Does that feel very comfortable to you? And you last year were as early as anybody on, I think the SEC is getting 3, and they did get 3. Are you completely at ease with that? Or do you think with the offseason rabble-rousing and the pressure the committee's going to be under that, man, for both the Big Ten and the SEC, like 6, I think the over-under for combined SEC Big Ten bids this year, where it's still 12, is 7.5. And I think you could also set it at 8. Because if you want to envision a world where like the SEC's whining and midness actually gets them 5, I don't think that's impossible. I think you'd set it at 7.5 or 8. You're at 6. Does that make you a little nervous?
It does. I'm worried about the late spring, early summer stumping that has happened from the SEC already. I'm worried about what some of those games looked like last year. Like if there's anybody in the committee room who in the back of their mind thinks, look, well, SMU wasn't competitive with Penn State and Indiana wasn't super competitive with Notre Dame. Let's not do that again. Like I am nervous about that. So no, I don't. I would love it if the playoff had the kind of balance that I'm projecting, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't somewhat concerned, if not, pretty concerned about thought processes changing now that we have some information.
Okay. My bracket, 4 Big Ten, 3 SEC, 2 Big 12, 1 ACC, Notre Dame, and a G5. So that's like 11 from the north and 1 from the south or whatever it is. So let's bring up my bracket. I'm not betting nothing on my bracket right now. I made the bracket and I was like, well, that's contrary to everything that I believe in my heart and soul and things I've said on this show. What am I doing? But it can get confusing a little bit. All right. So my bracket.
Okay, here we go.
Number 1 seed, Texas. Number 2 seed, Clemson. I do have Clemson at 13-0 as the 2 seed. Number 3 seed, Penn State. Number 4 seed, Ohio State, which the other thing, Landis, that we have not talked about is since we did our first bracket in March, they officially adopted the straight seeding. So we were giving the top 4 seeds to the conference champs in March because we weren't sure. And now here we are, and that's no longer the case. And so you see here, for instance, for me, both Penn State and Ohio State getting buys. I have that as my Big Ten championship game.
That was also my Big Ten championship game.
So what I have for this season is, for instance, Ohio State at 11-2, losing to Texas, beating Penn State at home in the regular season, and then losing the rematch to Penn State in the Big Ten title game.
That's exactly what I have.
And I have Penn State 11-1 in the regular season, only the loss at Ohio State and the winning of the rematch. We're in agreement on that?
We are in agreement on that, but you still had Ohio State getting the bye there. I did not. I had Ohio State 5th in that scenario.
And so I have Notre Dame, and this I think would be an interesting to watch this play out. I have Notre Dame undefeated and the 5 seed. And the 5 seed. Yeah. So like this is one of those where you start going through Notre Dame and they beat Miami, they beat Texas A&M, they beat Boise State, especially if Boise State's not a playoff team, and you start going through and it's like, man, Ohio State and Penn State split. Ohio State lost to Texas, who's the 1 seed, and Notre Dame didn't play anybody like that. I'm going to reward both those Big Ten title game teams. right? And Notre Dame doesn't have the burden or the opportunity of playing in a conference championship game. So I have like, this is again how you work these things out. But like a 12-0 Notre Dame, you and I both have Notre Dame undefeated. You have them as a 4, I have them as a 5, right?
I had Notre Dame as the 3.
Okay, so like that discussion would be interesting though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know what to make of it. I think your inclination is right. I think your inclination is right that the meat grinder. I mean, like Notre Dame plays an incredibly difficult schedule. I think it's sort of front loaded, but it's a tough schedule. I think being in a conference, playing in a conference title game would be rewarded. Although I'm not convinced like a conference title game loser would be ahead of an unbeaten Notre Dame.
Yeah. So I think Penn State and Ohio State splitting is a reward situation where the committee would want to reward both those teams.
It depends on how
close high level games.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if they are versions of what the Ohio State Oregon game was last year in the regular season, right? Like that kind of thing was like, man, these two teams are almost equal. They split. Notre Dame didn't play anybody like them. We're putting both of them ahead of Notre Dame. And now this type of seeding would allow you to do it, but also allows Notre Dame to compete for a top 4 spot, which they couldn't before. Anyway, Texas 1, Clemson 2, Penn State 3, Ohio State 4, Notre Dame 5, LSU 6. Run me through with a sword for picking that. I hate myself as a host, as a person, as a college football talker, as a human boy. I hate myself. Why did I pick LSU? 7, Illinois. 8, Georgia. 9, Kansas State. 10, Oregon. 11, Utah. By the dip. 12, 13-0, undefeated Toledo Rockets. Would you like to ride this rocket with me?
I'm in. I'm very much in on them. Like I don't know. Yeah, we need to have another conversation about what it would take for a MAC team to make the playoff. But I like
ride
it.
That rocket.
Yeah.
Ride
Plus, it's a great Rust Belt first round game. Toledo Notre Dame.
Come on.
Yeah.
How excited are you?
Yeah,
Come on with these games, by the way. And I have a 7-10 Illinois-Oregon game. They don't play each other in the regular season. So that'd be fun.
Yeah. That's
so
fun.
like we didn't delve into the brackets because like the brackets are going to be fun in the end, right? Can you imagine like Notre Dame beats Toledo and we get a 4-5 Ohio State quarterfinal game that's a rematch of the national championship game? Awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Put my face back on, Landis. I want to see my face.
All right. You want to look at yourself while you talk about how Garrett Nussmeier is going to make the playoff?
I'm oozing nuss. I hate myself. What is wrong with me? But here's what happened. Under the application of what we talked about, Texas in, enough questions about Bama and Georgia to not believe in both. So you put in Bama, not Georgia. I put in Georgia, not Bama. And now you go looking for another team. And then when you are in that search, and we don't pretend to be SEC experts, when you're in that search, you start playing the schedule game. And this is LSU losing to Clemson early in the year. And I also made a bet with Connor O'Gara that they're going to lose, like start 3-3. So I'm completely contradicting myself. I shouldn't even talk about it. I don't believe it. I dislike everything about this. Again, there's a project that we're working on that we say the name Brian Kelly 4,000 times in this project. And every time we say it, we go, good, that guy. And now I'm just like, yeah, give me some Nuss. Give me some Cajun Kelly. Sign me up for LSU as a 6 seed. I am a fraud. Take away my crown and run me through with a sword. What have I done to myself?
At least you're being honest about it. I think that's good. That's the step one, is admitting your mistake there. It's like, I don't know, like there's a group of SEC teams that like I don't know what to make of them. I will say, like, if you look at the odds, you have the 8 that are minus, and then the first team that is not is LSU. So like they're ninth in the playoff odds.
So right, so there's 10 of the top 19 are SEC. Here's the odds: Texas minus 300, Georgia minus 250, Alabama minus 150. So if you're not in on Georgia and Bama, right, you're ignoring one of those odds on favorites. LSU plus 136, Ole Miss plus 142. Would I feel any better about putting my money on Lane Kiffin right here? If you popped up my graphic and I was like, riding with the Lane train, let's go. Like that would make me sick to my stomach. I just need to put 2 SEC teams in and just feel better about myself. Plus 225 Tennessee, because App State's quarterback is going to lead Tennessee that lost some defensive guys to the playoff. Like, what are we doing there? Texas A&M, I'm in on Marcel Reed. Why am I doing that? Auburn, plus 390. Hugh Freeze, throw me out a window. I'm not picking Hugh Freeze to make the playoff.
You're Jackson Arnold. You're a Jackson Arnold guy.
I know, but but is that enough? I can't, like, is that the, like, Hugh Freeze is the coach of Auburn, right? I get all these guys mixed up.
Yes.
I can't bet on Hugh Freeze. Check his phone. I can't yell check his phone. Brian Kelly is more palatable to me than Hugh Freeze. South Carolina, who I had last time, and it's like, hey, Lenora Sellers. And I went down another rabbit hole of why Avery Johnson and Lenora Sellers are the same player. And Avery Johnson is getting 1% of the hype that Lenora Sellers is. And by the way, they lost a bunch of guys to the draft. And then Florida. And those are the 10 SEC teams. So in on Texas, pick one of Georgia and Bama. And then is there an SEC team that you could pick as the third SEC team to make the playoff that doesn't make you hate yourself?
Maybe Oklahoma if you want to take a big swing on John Mateer.
That's true. Although I'm getting, so I get again, like we watch all this stuff, but I've just gone back. I was watching Devin Dampier highlights again. Sign me up 4,000 ways for Utah. And by the way, I got Utah in my playoff. By the dip, I was watching Devin Dampier just destroy people last year for New Mexico. And then again, watching more highlights. Again, I've watched him before, but I was watching him again. I've doubted Oregon, and we have to talk about Evan Stewart a little bit because we haven't on the show yet. He's out for a long time, projected #1 receiver for Oregon. Just watching Dante Moore throw the ball in the spring game, God, that guy throws a nice ball, man. Again, like if we're gonna go down the path of like we're gonna have a parade for Lenora Sellers, I'm excited to see Dante Moore. I'm not questioning Dante Moore right now. He throws a nice ball. And by the way, I'm out on Bama. Like I saw a headline, somebody said, and I think maybe I agree with it, like the Bama quarterback situation is maybe as important of a spot as any in college football as they try to figure that out. Yeah. But like, I don't know. Why do I believe that Ty Simpson and I know Ryan Grubb is back with Kalen DeBoer to save Alabama football. I just think it's not going to work. So I'm out.
I can't help but believe a little bit in the DeBoer Grubb Northern magic.
Can we say where we are, by the way? Can we say where we are, which is we're waiting for Washington State with John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle and Washington with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb to save Oklahoma and Alabama. That's officially where we are. Who dominates the sport? That's where we are. Well, Oklahoma's probably dead. What if they just steal the Washington State offense? Solved. Alabama's dead. Well, what if they just bring the Washington offensive coordinator? Solved. And still their best receiver is going to be their second best. Ryan Williams is awesome. But Jeremy Bernard's still their second best receiver. Parker Brailsford's still their center. There's still Washington guys all over that roster. But show me Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk. And the North runs college football. You should read about it in Athlon magazine, Bill. What was the thing? Buy the dip and then buy the dip and buy the Rockets. So Toledo opens with Kentucky, which is exploding. People don't know this.
Vince Marrow.
Vince Marrow.
That ship.
Youngstown State guy, has been Mark Stoops' right-hand man, has been the guy that has allowed Kentucky to succeed in Ohio recruiting. And there has been this for a decade plus where all the kids in the state of Ohio who aren't quite good enough to get an Ohio State scholarship offer, instead of going to Illinois or Iowa or Michigan State or whatever, Mark D'Antonio won a lot of games with kids like that. They've been going to Kentucky because of Vince Marrow, because he was the recruiting coordinator for Kentucky. And now Vince Marrow this week just left to go to Louisville. So Toledo opened
in a non-coaching role, in a non-coaching role, right?
But he's gonna be the personnel director, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's gonna be. So that's huge. But so Toledo opens with Kentucky, and then they also have Western Kentucky, and then it's like so they just have enough, like beat an SEC team, but also they beat an SEC team last year. We had Jason Candle on the show. I gave him a sword through the screen, and then they lost their next game. So that's one of those. It's like this is for teams like this. Can you handle the ups and then do the things that you have to do? Because if you're a G5 team, you have no wiggle room. So anyway. You changed the teams that you bailed on in your playoff picks from your first picks. you were out on, you left off Michigan was the big one that you changed on. You changed on Boise State, you changed on BYU, and you changed on Georgia. We didn't touch on Michigan, and you changed on Arizona State. Why did you leave Michigan off? What, anything? Is it just like waiting to see what happens with the NCAA and how that affects their season? Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah. That's 95% of it. Yeah.
Okay. Which I think makes a ton of sense. I went from South Carolina to LSU with that pick. I've been from my first picks in trying to find another SEC team. I went from South Florida to Toledo for my group of 5 team. I also bailed on Tennessee, which is after Nico left, and I bailed on BYU. So I'm in on Kansas State and Utah as 2 Big 12 teams. Clemson as the only ACC. And I am still like all the way in on Illinois. I don't really have doubts about Illinois. They're plus 650 or so to make the playoff. It certainly doesn't mean it's a guarantee. But you clearly, like, looking at that Duke-Illinois game, something inside of you broke, Bill. You're a broken man now that you're riding with the Blue Devils over the Bielema Express. But it's the same thing we've talked about. That, again, I think you think Duke's Indiana. I think Illinois is Indiana. They lose to Ohio State. They win all the rest, and they're in good shape. Do you still consider, like, Illinois like a playoff contender?
Yeah.
Were they in your mix, or are you kind of not there?
No, they're definitely in the mix. There were two pivot games for me that I just kind of went the other way on. One was Duke and one was Indiana. I actually, as I played the schedule game, ended up with Indiana with 10 wins again, but out of the playoff.
Okay.
And I had Illinois at 9-3. But if Illinois is going to beat Duke and/or Indiana and is sitting there at 10-2 or 11-1, like I think they're very much at 10-2. They're at the very least in the conversation. 11-1, they're in, I think. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not I don't think I'm like downgrading Illinois. I think I'm just trying to be a little more respectful of their schedule, because there actually are more maybe potential stumbling blocks in there than I thought when I was looking at it like in January.
But they're pretty high in like the Bill kind of like returning production kind of stuff.
Super
like,
high.
They're like their offensive line is very good. Luke Altmaier as returning quarterback. They lost Josh McCray at running back in the portal to Georgia, but they still have a couple good backs to believe in. Really good secondary returning. They fortified on the defensive line. We talked about that. James Thompson coming from Wisconsin, those kind of things. So
there were also some close wins last year that I'm like, oh, like beating Purdue in overtime, right? It's just like there's what if the coin flips the other way a couple times for Illinois, right? I think while they are talented and return a bunch and should be respected, there's like some volatility there, I think, and
sure.
They're not a juggernaut, and I don't think Indiana's schedule was a real breeze until they got to Michigan and Ohio State. I don't think Illinois is the same.
Yeah. Okay. Those are our playoff picks. Oh, we didn't talk about this with Oregon. The Evan Stewart injury. Dante Moore throws a nice ball. They're going to have Decorian Moore. They're going to have Kenyon Sadiq at tight end. They're going to have Mekhi Hughes at running back. They added 2 awesome tackles and a great guard in the portal. They revamped their secondary. I still am not like 1,000%. I will be very curious in the preseason for what the discussion is like around Oregon. They are not at the same level to me of assumption that I'm pretty locked in on. I think Notre Dame is going to be very good. I think Penn State is going to be very good. The repeat discussion that we had on here about Ohio State helped me realize that I know they lost a lot of great players, but there is a lot there for Ohio State to be a 2-loss team that gets in the playoff with ease and then is a very difficult out in the postseason. Those 3 teams, I really am not questioning at all. I'm not putting Oregon quite in that category, but man, Dante Moore throws a good ball, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like, how are we? You said the schedule, like there's just, other than the Penn State trip, it's like, where are they going to lose? We've been high on Washington at times. What a banger that would be at the end of the year if Washington shows that they are really competitive and you get Oregon, Washington to end the season. But it's schedule, but also Dante Moore has a chance to pop this year, right?
He does. Of those 8 teams that are the odds-on favorites, Oregon has the 3rd easiest schedule by SP+. Okay. Notre Dame's actually the easiest, and Clemson is the 2nd easiest. I I don't think Dante Moore is going to be bad necessarily. It's the last time we saw him playing snaps of any level of meaningfulness, like he wasn't very good, but he's also a true freshman on a team that wasn't very good and probably just playing too early. But I want to see it again. I also think it's going to be hard to be as good as Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel, which is fine. I don't know that you have to be as good as those guys for Oregon to get back to the playoff. So like I think Oregon's still quite good. Like for Oregon to be among this group, I think for the most part makes sense, especially when you look at the schedule. I actually think like Evan Stewart I don't mean to rag on a guy when he's injured, like the extent to which he makes an impact on games, I think has been largely overstated in his career. So I think Oregon can be fine. Like can find a way around it with young receivers, but who haven't played a whole lot, but they're hurting for receiver talent. So, and they have a good offensive coordinator and a good scheme to figure things out around that. So I think they'll be okay. I am very locked in on Penn State's going to beat them in September, but other than that, like in my projection, I had Oregon losing to Penn State, and I actually had them losing to Washington at the end of the season. But I could also see
them losing at Iowa. Like,
they could drop a game. They could drop like a somewhat unexpected game on the road in the Big Ten, I think.
And this, you have to do this, I think, to some degree when you're going through it. And again, for my 12 playoff teams, I have the records for everybody. So Oregon to me was lose at Penn State and then somewhere else because they didn't last year, because they survived. They survived that playing 6 straight games and being out of gas at Wisconsin and still finding a way to win. And then you just lose goofy games. So Oregon to me is lose at Penn State, lose something else that wouldn't necessarily expect them to lose, but they lose to a pretty good team, and then they're 10-2, and I have them as a 10 seed. And so I don't view them as the big 3 in the North. I view them next, but I actually don't have much doubt around it anymore at the moment. I had more doubt earlier in the offseason. And again, I think somehow like Evan Stewart, probably it's like, I don't know, people having huge Evan Stewart conversations. Then he got hurt. People are like, oh my God, he got hurt. And it's like, well, he had like 3 games last year where he kind of mattered. One of them was against Ohio State, but like a lot of the rest of the time he was kind of silent, and he's a little bit maybe more of like a deep ball guy, and I don't know what else there is, and so you can't ignore a guy and then when he gets hurt be like, oh my God, how are they going to survive without him? It's like, he was good, and if you didn't know he was good before, that's on you, but also I don't think it destroys the offense. So
I don't think it destroys the offense. No, not at all. I wasn't anticipating him being their best receiver this year. I thought like I'm all in on DeCorian Moore being Oregon's best receiver this year.
Ohio State, Oregon, KOTN Showdown. That's what that matchup will be. It's on the schedule. It's not today, but it will be there soon enough. Because what's on the schedule today is a KOTN Showdown between Pitt and Boston College. Whatcha at the end of the show. Quick break. Back with the Eagles and Panthers after this. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, Kings of the North, a loyal, dedicated, educated audience of Northern college football fans here for a KOTN Showdown between the Boston College Eagles and the Pitt Panthers. Win totals 5.5 for both, Landis. So decent comparison here. Yes,
it is a decent comparison. Is this the first showdown we've done of teams that are playing each other?
Oh,
can't remember.
We've there's been do Michigan State, Wisconsin play each other?
It's a great question that I don't know the answer to.
Many of the ones that we did are across conferences. So, so yes, they do play each other in week 6, Boston College at Pitt on October 4th. ACC odds, Pitt is tied for 9th. Best odds to win the ACC with North Carolina at 40-1. Boston College is 13th in the ACC at 70-1. As we said, 5.5 win totals for both. Although Pitt is minus 178 for the over, and Boston College is plus 114 for the over. So Pitt is 5.5, but like almost at 6 or 6.5. And Boston College is closer to 5 or 4.5. So like they're the same right now, but the odds makers would tell you they think, that Pitt will have a better season. 18-16, Pitt leads the series. Boston College won at home last year. The game this year is at Pitt. Since Pitt joined the ACC, Boston College leads the series 3-2. Head coaches Pat Narduzzi is 59. Bill O'Brien is 55.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk quarterback. And I am very excited. You're doing Boston College. I'm doing Pitt. I am very excited to see what you dug up about the Boston College quarterback situation as it stands. Because one of the reasons, and like as we piece these KOTN showdowns together, it's like, why are we doing these two teams? Well, they're both ACC teams, but they both have sort of like veteran old school coaches, but they both are potentially being quarterbacked by Alabama transfers who were big time Alabama recruits and left before they got a chance to play. Either Eli Holstein, now at Pitt, or Dylan Lonergan, now at Boston College, could absolutely be in the fight at Alabama with Ty Simpson and others right now to be the starting quarterback for Alabama.
Yeah.
And before this transfer portal world, they would have been. But Eli Holstein left last year, won the job at Pitt. Dylan Lonergan left this offseason, trying to win the job at BC. So that is also a super interesting comparison point, and one of the reasons we put these two teams together, Landis, because is Dylan Lonergan going to win this job?
It kind of feels like it. So Bill O'Brien did not name a starter coming out of the spring. I think most things you read about BC as it pertains to the quarterback position in spring ball tells you that Grayson James, who started a handful of games last year, he was 3-2 as a starter, but then also helped lead a comeback win against Syracuse. It was like kind of like 4-2, excuse me, playing high leverage snaps. He had a fine spring. He's an older guy. He was at FIU before he was at Boston College. But I don't think Grayson James does anything to sort of like blow you away. His greatest trait probably is that he just sort of has a high floor. And Lonergan has a little more to him. Lonergan was a 4-star prospect, like top 150-ish kind of overall recruit when Alabama signed him and Eli Holstein in the same recruiting class. Both of them like very like similar recruiting profiles, I think, if I can recall correctly. So you'll just read a lot of like Grayson James was good, Dylan Lonergan was good, but Dylan Lonergan made 3 extraordinary plays in the course of practice that makes you think like he's going to be the starter. And I think when they get back on the field for camp and battle it out, my expectation is that ultimately Dylan Lonergan will be the guy that wins the job. I think there's a little bit of gamesmanship, not to paint it in a negative light, in Bill O'Brien not naming a starter after spring, because however it shakes out, it's very important that Boston College keeps Grayson James on its roster. So they didn't want to name Dylan Lonergan the starter coming out of spring and have Grayson James leave, and then all of a sudden your quarterback situation is a transfer from Alabama who's in his 3rd year but hasn't played at all, and a true freshman. So and that's what it would have been had Grayson James left. So I actually think with those guys on the roster and battling it out, and Shaker Rising as a true freshman, who's like kind of the 3rd guy in the room, it sets up to be a decent quarterback deal for Boston College. Because I think it'll end up that you play the younger, inexperienced, higher ceiling and higher and lower floor probably guy in Lonergan, but you know that you sort of have a steady Eddie backup in Grayson James should you need to go to him, the way that they did last year when Thomas Castellanos was a bit of a volatile player for Boston College. So everything that I'm seeing suggests that it will eventually be Lonergan, but Grayson James' experience could win out, I think, or maybe it's a situation where James starts the year and over time Lonergan takes over. I don't want to close the door on that possibility, but I think at some point this season Lonergan will be Boston College's starting quarterback.
And again, it is remarkable, the comparisons here, because this is exactly how it played out at Pitt last year. Because Grayson James was sort of the part-time starter for BC last year. In 2023, Nate Yarnell at the end of the year at Pitt was kind of the starter at the end, and then they bring in the transfer, and then they battled, and then Eli Holstein didn't win the job for Pitt last year until like the last week of camp.
Yeah.
But I think they sort of slow played it on purpose to keep all the quarterbacks happy, to keep them all there, to have a true competition. But then in the end, they went with the new guy with the higher upside. And I do think Grayson James, is this a fair statement? I think Grayson James is a high quality ACC backup. And I think he showed that last year. And he won games for Boston College when he had to come in. But if he is your planned starter, you're putting a ceiling on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so for him to be prepared if needed, but Dylan Lonergan to be the guy, it's hard to get away from that. So you are officially predicting that?
I am predicting that. I will plant my flag on Dylan Lonergan is BC's starting quarterback. Because the other part of it too is for as much as Grayson James did for BC last year, and he got them over the hump to bowl eligibility and allowed them to finish with a winning record. He's not a guy Bill O'Brien brought in, right? So, and Lonergan is a guy that O'Brien knew when he was in high school, and I think that personal relationship will matter too.
Yeah, and this is the beginning of if Bill O'Brien stays at BC and can do this, and can he establish an East Coast quarterback factory?
Yeah,
and Dylan Lonergan is piece 1, and Shaker Rising is piece 2, and if this can happen, I will in the place where Doug Flutie and Matt Ryan thrive. It's oh, what's Boston College going to do? Produce a bunch of NFL quarterbacks? Yeah. It's exactly what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. This is super interesting to see how this shakes out. I think it's going to be Dylan Lonergan. And if they do that, when Eli Holstein won the job last year at Pitt, guess what happened? Pitt started 7-0. They were one of 7 Power 4 undefeated teams remaining. They were 18th in the AP poll, and then stuff exploded. So he was really going good through 5 games. And then it fell off. He played Eli Holstein for Pitt last year, played 10 total games. We've covered this many times to run through it quickly. First 5 games, 313 passing yards per game. Last 5, 132 yards per game. First 5, average 23 of 34, 66%. Last 5 games, 13 of 24, 56%. First 5 games, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Last 5 games, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He threw exactly 3 touchdown passes in the first 5 games of the year. He was tied for 4th in the Power 4 in touchdown passes through 5 games. He was 11th in yards. PFF rating, 39th among Power Conference quarterbacks for the first 5 games, 75th of 79 for all the games after the first 5 games. First 5 games, 8 big-time throws, 9 turnover-worthy plays. End of the year, 4 big-time throws, 11 turnover-worthy plays. So we knew he was a little loose even when it was going well. He had more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. He led miracle comebacks to win games against Cincinnati and West Virginia. He was sort of getting away with it, and you thought it might come back to bite him. But then the other thing that happened in the second half of the year is he had 2 head injuries. Yeah. He left the Syracuse game and the Virginia game after getting hit in the head. The second one was a slide where the guy nailed him and got a targeting call and got ejected, which is the most dangerous play in sport for a quarterback is you're sliding and a guy missiles you anyway. And then he hurt his ankle and didn't play the last 2 games. This guy got beaten up like crazy and their season fell apart. So it is as stark as you could be. He was a gaming 300-yard per game comeback maniac as Pitt started the year. And then he got hurt and his gunslingerness caught up with him. So who is he? Because he was 2 completely different people last year. If he can stay a little healthier, he's probably maybe got to stay in the pocket a little bit more. This guy puts his body on the line. And also we'll talk about it. Their offensive line had a gigantic season-changing injury that timed up with when everything fell apart. So they've got to protect him. He's got to protect himself. He'll be a second-year starter with Cade Bell. I think it's interesting. I think you'll get a more consistent version of him. And by the way, as you brought up on a show earlier, they signed the guy that was Cade Bell, second-year offensive coordinator who came from Western Carolina. His last quarterback at Western Carolina, Cole Gonzalez, they brought him in the portal. And he is Eli Holstein Jr. So if for some reason you get the loose turnover-worthy play Eli Holstein, they're going to play the guy that Cade Bell knows. So they have a pull in case of emergency quarterback ready that they brought in after the spring. So do you believe in Eli Holstein? Or are you prove it to me again?
That's a good question. I don't know that I don't fully believe in him. No, because I don't. You asked the question which of those two sides of Eli Holstein is the real one. I don't know the answer to that. If you're gonna tell me that he's gonna do a better job of keeping himself upright, because I think you almost live with like he's a gunslinger, right? Like he
Yes.
takes chances that maybe he shouldn't take at times. Pitt probably needs that from its quarterback, if we're being honest. So like I don't dislike that part as much as I dislike his inability to protect himself at times that then leads to like more poor play. So and he was playing for the first time last year. Like you have to understand the speed of the game and how fast space closes on you and those kind of things.
Yep.
Like and I think like now having gone through it, maybe he'll be better off for it. So like I'm not totally out on him, I guess is the way that I would say it. I'm a little bit wait and see, but I certainly see a path for another step forward for him, second year in the offense and second year, starting in major college football.
And it was starting to get away from him before he got hurt. They beat Cal 17-15 in a game where the defense stepped up and saved them.
Mm-hmm.
He threw 2 picks in Cal territory, and Des Reed had a gigantic touchdown play, and the defense won that game. And then he started to get hurt, right? So both at the same time, and what you're talking about, all the quotes this spring from Cade Bell and Pat Narduzzi, second year in the system, second year in the offense. He's smarter. He understands it better. You should see that natural progression. And then also like the frustration around it. Holstein's talking about like knowing, I think that he's got to take care of himself a little bit. So is there anything that would lead you to believe that Dylan Lonergan, I mean, the profile again is so similar. Mm-hmm. Do you think Dylan Lonergan's upside is higher than Eli Holstein for any reason? Because otherwise, if the answer is no, then I think we've got to go with Pitt for quarterback just because Eli Holstein's played for a year.
Yeah, I would have nothing to base that on. So I would say no. I could maybe make an argument that Bill O'Brien's track record as a quarterback developer and maybe the nature of the offense might put Dylan Lonergan in some easier situations to succeed, but that's also that's almost entirely projection. So I would go with Pitt because we've seen Holstein, and at least in seeing him, there's been some flashes of real upside there.
And I'd rather have a guy who makes plays that you're trying to pull the reins back on 30% than have like a guy who came out and was steady and was like, I don't know, is there any upside here? So I do think Holstein has more probably athleticism than Lonergan does, like more play extension stuff than Lonergan does. Based off, you can find a way to do that. You can find a way to do that. Like you don't take it away, but you just get a little smarter with it. Mm-hmm. So I think again, if I think there's a lot of frustration. Obviously, they won their first 7, they lost their last 6. It's as much of a split season as you'll ever see. Guy took 2 headshots, so like that is, and
both pretty nasty because one was the one we saw at Syracuse, like his head got slammed to the ground, right?
Yes. Yeah. One, his head got slammed to the ground. The other one was a slide and getting targeted. Yeah. So like those are bad. And like that Syracuse game, they won, but it's because they had 3 pick sixes and the Pitt offense was barely on the field. Mm-hmm. Right. So like he didn't do anything in that game because he didn't have to, because the defense started to win them games. So anyway, we'll take Pitt. And it's just the advice again. If you're a Pitt fan, if you're someone who noticed that they fell off or whatever, don't only think of the second half of the year. Don't be blind to it. But like I don't think because they collapsed, it means that Pitt's going to suck this year and that their quarterback play is going to be terrible. All right, skill position, BC, what do you got?
I think they're in pretty good shape. If you go by targets, 4 of the top 6 guys are back. That includes Lewis Bond at receiver, who maybe didn't have as good of a year last year as was anticipated, but I think you and I agree is a pretty solid wide receiver 1 for them. Reed Harris is back. I think he's got a lot of upside. Big guy, pretty explosive. Jaden Skeet is also back. And then the 4th guy there is tight end Jeremiah Franklin, who's a pretty good, reliable pass catching tight end. I think they could also get a boost at receiver from one of the transfers they brought in, Rocket Wilkins from Campbell. They have in their skill positions, they have a guy named Rocket and a guy named Turbo, which is pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
Running backs a little, it's being made over. I still think it could be okay. So Kai Robichaux's gone, Trayshawn Warder gone. Turbo Richard, who was a true freshman last year and was like kind of the 3rd guy in a 3-man kind of operation, will now become the top guy, and he's got a lot of potential. He's another really explosive player. That's why he's named Turbo. So I think he's kind of ready to be number 1 running back, and then he'll be helped out by Jordan McDonald, who is kind of the 4th guy. He's like a grinder kind of running back. Bill O'Brien had a big game or two. Had a big game or two. Yeah. Right? Like he had like 50 something carries last year, like and was productive on those carries. Just didn't have a huge workload. But I think he's a fine number 2 option, or even he's like the number 3. The other guy there is Alex Broom, who again, is like a guy that Bill O'Brien just like McDonald and Broom are two guys that Bill O'Brien seems to like really, really like. And Broom missed all of last year with an injury.
Okay.
But I think he's expected to be the third man there. So I think receiver's good. I think running back, there are some mild questions, just because like Robichaux and Trayshawn Ward were decent players that they'll have to replace. And then I think tight end's in pretty good shape with Jeremiah Franklin. So I was actually like going through this sort of like refreshingly surprised by how decent of shape the skill positions were for BC.
Yeah, I think both these teams are maybe better skill than you would expect from teams like this. And for Pitt, obviously, that starts with Des Reed. He was 7th in the nation last year in yards from scrimmage, 141 yards per game. He's first among returning players. So the 6 guys ahead of him last year were like Ashton Genty, Cam Scattaboo, Caleb Johnson. All these guys are in the NFL. Des Reed, the Pitt running back, the transfer from Western Carolina who followed Cade Bell last year, who's a little pocket rocket, is number 1 in the nation among returning players in yards from scrimmage last year at Pitt. Let that sink in.
He's fun, man.
Second team All-American. We talked about him a ton on this show. He's back. Rodney Hammond, their backup running back, transferred to Sacramento State. Couple decent guys. Janarian Turner is like the next Des Reed. He's from Florida, like Reed. He's small, and they're kind of like gearing him up for what's next. But like Des Reed's going to be the guy at running back, and it's going to get the ball 30 times a game. Tight end, they lost Gavin Bartholomew, who was among our like great Northern tight ends last year, was a 6th round draft pick. His backup, Jake Overman, will take over, but they're going to miss him, Landis. Like Gavin Bartholomew is a really good player. Only 322 receiving yards last year. He was the 11th tight end taken in the draft, but he was like basically a 4-year starter for them. He leaves a hole, and they've kind of been scrounging around a little bit. They're not gonna figure this out. They're gonna miss Gavin Bartholomew, which is what happens when you have a good player, right?
Yeah, and he had like a bounce back year last year too, which was good for him. Hard, yeah, big shoes to fill. I'm not sure Pitt has the guys necessarily to do it.
2 of their top 3 receivers back. Kanata Mumfield, who was their leading receiver, 7th round draft pick. He's gone. But Kenny Johnson and Poppy Williams are back. Lot of good things about Kenny Johnson having a great spring, like really turning into a number 1 receiver. Narduzzi said he's been outstanding. Quote, he's a different receiver than he was last year. The details to his route running is kind of the main thing. So he was 46 catches, 537 last year. Really good, and has a chance to elevate and be a number 1 guy. So I think that's real. Sincere Lead was their number 4 receiver last year. So they have 3 of their top 4 receivers back. And then they added a couple guys in the transfer portal. Blue Hicks, 65-yard slant for a touchdown in the spring game from the portal. He's pretty interesting. And then the other guy is Deuce Spann, which is one of these guys in the portal, Landis, where it's like, he's 6'4". He used to play at Florida State, and he has 15 catches in 4 years of college football, but he's 6'4" and he has a pedigree. So he was at Illinois for 1 year, then Florida State for 3, but he didn't do anything. So I don't know. Like, people kind of seemed excited, and Narduzzi said he feels better about the receivers than he did last year. So All-American at running back, Hole at tight end, 3 of their top 4 receivers back, and a couple at least interesting guys in the portal. I like it. And so if you like Boston College, I like Pitt. I think Des Reed's the trump card. He's the best player. I think he's the best player on these 2 teams on either side of the ball. Kyle Lewis, the Pitt linebacker, would give him a run for that. But most impactful, probably, I think I go Pitt here for skill.
I go Pitt here. I do think Des Reed's the trump card. And I think, even though BC has like 3 of the top 4 guys back in terms of targets, they probably weren't as productive as you would have liked. They only had 3 players catch 20 passes last year, and Lewis Bond had 67, and the next closest guy had 28.
Okay.
So like they need to get some more production out of the guys that are coming back. And I think Pitt has probably more established production. So I think Pitt's the right lean.
But I just would say, like, sometimes if you just have an assumption about teams like this, Northern teams in the ACC, I don't know. They both have some dudes. Like they're going to be okay with the guys who have the ball.
I think Turbo Richard could really break out for Boston College this year. Yeah.
It's like if he played for the Bruins, he'd be Turbo Richard and he'd be the most popular player of the NAL. It's really hard for me. Yeah. And because if he's not going to be Turbo Richard, then I think his name should be Richard Turbo. So he's right there. Turbo Richard is a great name, but it's right on the edge of being a classic all-timer. Right. Offensive line for BC. They've been just running guys to the NFL for a couple of years here.
I don't know. We don't talk enough about how good of an offensive line program Boston College is. That development will be tested. They are losing 3 starters. 2 of them were drafted. Ozzie Trapillo was a 2nd-round draft pick. Drew Kendall was a 5th-round draft pick. And then the 3rd starter was a UDFA with the Patriots. So, like, they had a very good offensive line last year, and they have a lot to replace. 2 guys that are back. Logan Taylor has played a lot, 30-plus starts at both Virginia and then at Boston College. He'll start at left guard. He didn't have a great year last year, but if you look at like how he's played previously, it feels a little bit like an outlier. I think he should be okay at left guard. Jude Bowery is very interesting. Like Dane Brugler had Jude Bowery in his 1st-round mock draft for 2026. Left tackle, battled some injuries, but there's a lot of upside there. Like he could be the next sort of high-end draft pick coming out of BC. So you have those 2 guys. Dwayne Alec played a decent amount on the interior last year. I think he could be an option at guard or center. They're adding a transfer from Princeton named Tommy Matheson, who wasn't with the team this spring because he's an Ivy League transfer. He couldn't join until the summer, but he's another guy that could play guard or center. Eric Doherty is an interesting player, converted from defensive line last year as a redshirt freshman, and then played some and had to start in the bowl game actually, and played pretty well. So like those are 3 guys for sort of 2 interior spots. You're looking for a right guard in the center. It'll be Alec, Matheson, or Doherty, some mix of those 3. And then the other tackle spot at right tackle, Kevin Klein is an older guy who's I think he's going into his 6th year. He's been around for a while. Has not played a ton. He's made a couple starts. And then there's a younger guy, Ryan Mickow, who was okay when he got on the field a little bit last year. I think they'll battle it out for right tackle. I don't think they won't be as good as they were last year because I like there's like Trapillo and Kendall were very good.
Yeah.
I think there's enough back for the offensive line to be decent. It's a fairly large question mark. I think quarterback probably more of a question mark than offensive line, but a lot to make up for with the losses that BC had. But I think they're positioned okay to figure it out.
Pitt's got a lot. I don't know. Like I'm setting myself up. We're gonna have a fight, I think, at the end of this discussion about like I should have put Pitt in the playoff instead of LSU. And you're gonna be like, are we sure Narduzzi's not gonna get fired? And I'm gonna be like, I think they're gonna win 11 games. Center, returning starter back. Right guard, returning starter back. Lyndon Cooper, BJ Williams. Right tackle, 3rd-year returning starter back. Ryan Baer was the right tackle last year. Branson Taylor, the left tackle, got hurt in week 6 against Cal. They won that game. The next week they played Syracuse. Next game they played Syracuse. The offense barely played because Kyle McCord threw 6 interceptions. That was the first game without him, and then they didn't win again the rest of the year. So they basically, as much as they fell off a cliff with the Eli Holstein injuries, I think the line in the sand for Pitt last year was when Branson Taylor, the left tackle, got hurt. He was a 6th-round pick in the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. He was a really good left tackle, and when he got hurt, they moved Ryan Baer from right tackle to left tackle. He wasn't nearly as good at left tackle as he was at right, and then replacing Baer at right tackle was a mess the rest of the year. So they weakened both tackle positions, and then they couldn't protect. And they gave up 43 sacks last year among the bottom 10 in the country. They're among the bottom 5 in the P4. They could not protect. They had a game where they gave up 8 sacks last year, but they only gave up 14 sacks in the first 6 games when Branson Taylor was playing, and they gave up 29 sacks in the last 7 games when he got hurt. So they have 3 of those 5 starters back. And again, if you're a Power 4 team that's trying to be good, should you fall apart with one offensive line injury? Well, he's an NFL guy at left tackle, and you're Pitt. You're not Ohio State. You're not Georgia, right? Like you would hope you would have the depth to make up for that, but I get it. So again, if you're trying to think about Pitt compared to last year, their left tackle got hurt and their offense fell apart. 3 starters back. Left tackle, we've talked about this already. It's either going to be Jeffrey Percy, who's a Michigan transfer, who in 5 years at Michigan played 41 games, made 3 starts. This is a jump for him. But they also added an up transfer named Kendall Stanley, who has 3 years of eligibility remaining and was the right tackle at Charlotte last year and was one of the better tackles in the American. And he was playing left tackle this spring. So it's a starting right tackle up transfer or a down transfer from Percy. right, who is a backup at a national championship program. So you have 2 shots at left tackle. And then probably the loser of the left tackle composition with Keith Gouveia, who's a Richmond transfer. He's probably going to be the left guard. But between the 3 returning starters and the 3 portal guys, you have 6 guys that give you a chance. I think the offensive line is going to be pretty good again, Landis. And again, are they 1 injury away from collapse? Maybe. But they were pretty good last year before the injury, and I think they're going to be pretty good again this year. And again, they're taking, I think, the right kind of swings in the portal. 2 up transfers, 1 sideways transfer. I think I go Pitt for offensive line.
So like no one has like Jude Bowery has the most like pro upside, I think, of anybody on these 2 offensive lines. Pitt has more back in terms of percentage of snaps from last year by a fair like 20% more than Boston College has. Boston College has a better track record as an offensive line program. I'm a little split. Do you feel good? You feel good about Boston College's offensive line? Like it's not as experienced, but you think the development track record, they're going to be in good shape? Yeah, I think the only spot that like concerns me a little bit for BC would be right tackle. But I think they're in decent shape. Yeah.
If you want to lean BC, I would like to reinforce to people that I think the Pitt offensive line is going to be pretty decent. And just because they gave up a boatload of sacks last year, I think they're more prepared to handle that. I really think Kendall Stanley, I think, is going to be pretty good.
When we went through the offensive line show, Pitt, I think, was the team that had the most guys play last year. I think that's
possible.
I think they had 10 guys start last year.
Because I think they had multiple guys start at right tackle after Bear moved. Yeah. I think they had multiple guys start at left tackle. At left guard, Ryan Jacoby and some other people there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
like I wouldn't bank on that. I mean, hopefully for Pitt that doesn't happen again. So with health, I could see Pitt's offensive line being better than BC's. So I don't. It's close for me. It's honestly a coin flip. Let's call
it a tie. Let's call it a tie for now, and we'll get back to it.
Okay.
All right. Let's go to defense. Defensive front 7. BC better bring it because we got some sharks in the water here at Pitt. So what do you got for BC?
Yeah, this is BC's losing this one. BC has to replace Donovan Ezeraku at defensive end, and I have no idea how they're going to do it.
That's tough.
There's just, like even if you were a program that recruited and developed really well on the defensive line, he would be tough to replace, but that's not necessarily the profile of Boston College. BC took 7 defensive line transfers, tackles and edges. 4 of them are from FCS. 1's from Division II. The 2 power conference transfers they took are 2nd and 3rd year players who like really haven't played at all. I don't think this is going to be a good defense. It's not going to be a good defensive line. Maybe the linebackers will be a little better. I guess the most interesting guy along the defensive line is Quintavious Hutchins. Like he was 3rd in defensive end snaps last year, but basically was the 2nd starter opposite Ezeraku. Had 3.5 sacks, 22 pressures. I think there's a hope that he takes a jump. I think they really need him to take a jump. There's a younger guy named Jason Flint who redshirted last year, who made a couple plays in the bowl game and has had a good spring. People are excited about him. Like maybe he can be a guy that helps them patch some holes. Like everything about BC's defensive line is like, can they just throw enough bodies at it to make it be somewhat respectable? I'm not convinced they can. I think tackle is maybe slightly better off than defensive end. They were hit by a late transfer from George Rooks, who started last year and transferred to Syracuse, actually. They also lost Cam Horsley, who was a really good player for them in the middle. He just ran out of eligibility. I think that's going to be a bit of a sore spot for them too at defensive tackle. Linebacker, like I said, slightly better off. Davion Crouch started every game last year. He's back. Owen McGowan started a couple games last year. He's back. They added a transfer from Michigan named Jason Hewlett, who has not played a lot, but has like a versatile athletic profile. So maybe he can be some mix of off-ball linebacker and pass rusher. But there's a ton of projection here with a lot of guys who have not done really a whole lot. I don't think this is going to be a particularly good front 7.
Pitt might have the best linebackers in the country.
Yes.
Kyle Lewis was a 2nd-team All-American on most teams last year, was a 1st-team All-American by the Sporting News. That made him the first sophomore 1st-team All-American at Pitt on Pitt's first sophomore defensive All-American since Hugh Green in 1978. Hugh Green's like a legend. So anyway, Kyle Lewis is in the conversation among the best linebackers in the country. And Rasheem Biles is not that far behind him. And Braylon Lovelace also played a lot last year and is really good. Kyle Lewis, third in the ACC Defensive Player of the Year voting last year. Those linebackers get downhill. Kyle Lewis, 15.5 tackles for loss. Rasheem Biles, 14.5 tackles for loss. Lovelace, 10.5 tackles for loss. Pitt averaged 8.15 tackles for loss last year per game, 4th in the nation. They get after you. Why I said Sharks, they called the linebackers the Sharks. The Pitt students would have blow-up Sharks in the stands. They're ravenous. Defensive line, pretty good. Both starting tackles back. Jimmy Scott at edge, 12.5 tackles for loss last year. Had 3 sacks against Cal. Motor and athleticism. I don't know that he has a ton in the toolbox right now with moves. Motor and athleticism. He is a real dude. And they added Blaine Spires, who's a 7th-year guy, as a transfer from Utah State. 4 years at Bowling Green, 2 at Utah State. 7th year at Pitt. They did lose a guy in the portal. Francis Brew is an Ohio kid who's a 2nd-year defensive tackle who was a freshman All-American last year, has a chance to pop this year. Watch that guy. Watch that. Do you know that name at all? Columbus kid?
No.
Watch that guy. Added an edge guy from Oregon. Added an edge guy from Eastern Michigan. So like 3 of 4 starters back on the defensive line. Awesome linebackers. This is a strength of the team. The defense was not good early last year. And then they won a couple games in the middle of the year against Cal and Syracuse when the offense started to fall apart because the defensive front 7 was destroying people. So this is Pitt, not just over BC from the defensive front 7. I think Pitt is one of the better defensive front 7s in the entire North. And the linebackers are as good as anybody in the country.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer. Like Pitt wins this. That front and the way that their style of defense too, like just like leans into it. So they're gonna be good. The linebackers are awesome. But they're like Pitt's always pretty good on the defensive line too. So that's
Randy Bates is a pretty good defensive coordinator. Like this is what they do. It was weird last year and it was one of those again where they were going fast and they played a different style of offense, and I think it had a negative effect on the defense early, and then they had to sort of get back to that complementary football. But I think this defense is be pretty good. Secondary, what do you got for BC?
Good. The secondary is definitely the strength of the defense for BC, and maybe the best unit on the team. Safety is strong. KP Price is back. He was one of the best safeties in the ACC last year. And then between Carter Davis and Omar Thornton, who both started games at free safety, one is a true freshman, the other is a redshirt freshman. Like they're both back. They have 3 safeties there who can definitely play at a high level in the ACC. And then corner is pretty good as well. Max Tucker's a 3rd-year player who started 15 games in his career. He's number 1. Amari Jackson was the starter for half the season last year. Then he got hurt, and when he got hurt, Ashton McShane had to play as a true freshman and actually played pretty well as a true freshman. And both those guys are back. So you have 3 corners there, Max Tucker, Amari Jackson, and Ashton McShane, who are all pretty quality players. The only kind of question mark, I guess, is the nickel position. Cameron Martinez, who was at Ohio State, transferred to BC last year, was like the backup nickel last year. He didn't play well when he was at Ohio State. He didn't play very well last year at Boston College when he got on the field, but he sort of penciled in as the nickel. I wouldn't be surprised if you have sort of an overflow at both outside corner and safety, if one of those guys maybe more plays the nickel for BC this year. But I think it's not to the same level as like the Pitt linebackers. So I don't want to overstate it, but I think Boston College has the chance to have like a top, I don't know, definitely top half of the ACC kind of secondary, maybe like more like a top 5 in the ACC kind of secondary.
I think it's going to be BC. Pitt lost Donovan McMillan, leading tackler, 2nd team All ACC safety, lost him to the draft. Javon McIntyre is back at the other safety spot as a 3rd-year starter. Cruz Brookins is a Pittsburgh kid, local Pittsburgh high school star, played quarterback in high school. is ready to take over from McMillan, and people are really excited about him. And again, he talked all spring about how much he learned from McMillan last year, and he's a really good athlete, and he has a chance to be pretty good right away. Richard Battle back at one corner spot as a starter. They lost their other starting corner, Rylan Gandy, transferred to Indiana. But a guy named Shadarian Drip Harrison, his nickname is Drip.
Like that.
Shadarian Drip Harrison won the award for the most improved defensive player in the spring. He has a chance to pop. Tamon Lynham, Nebraska transfer, who played a little bit last year, started 3 games, also in the mix. And then they added a spring portal guy, Zion Ferguson, transferred from North Carolina. He redshirted last year at North Carolina, but he was a 4-star cornerback recruit out of Florida, out of high school, and transferred to Pitt. So they lost their best guy, and their best safety graduated, their best corner transferred. But I think they're ready. I think they're going to be fine. And there's a couple guys, Harrison and Ferguson and Brookins, who are young guys who I think have a chance to be pretty good, but I still think the lean BC here.
I would lean BC because BC, there's less projection. Like, there's just more guys who have done more at a higher level, I think. But with Randy Bates and Pat Narduzzi, like, I think Pitt will figure it out on defense. Like, I have confidence in that. But I'll take the experience of BC in the secondary.
All right, coaches, how you feeling about BC?
Feel good about the fit with Bill O'Brien, right? We liked it when it happened. We think he has longevity there. I think the question for him, so he was 7-6 in his first year, which is great. It's also basically what the previous 2 Boston College coaches. I think the thing that Boston College is looking for is someone who can elevate beyond that. And I guess that is the task for Bill O'Brien. BC was 7-6 last year. It's kind of blew my mind. BC has won 6 or 7 games 11 times in the last 15 years.
Wow.
It's just what they do. They win 6 or they win 7. They go to a bowl game. And that's like, fair expectations, I think, for the program. But I think Bill O'Brien, there's hope anyway that Bill O'Brien is maybe the coach that can try to push BC to not regularly winning 8, 9, 10 games, but at least spiking to that kind of territory more often than BC has in the recent past.
Pat Narduzzi chasing Jock Sutherland. Jock Sutherland, 111 all-time wins between 1924 and 1938. Pitt's coaching leader. Pat Narduzzi, 10 years in, 72-56. Do you know how many Power 4 head coaches have been at their schools longer than Pat Narduzzi, who is entering year 11 at Pitt?
Well, I know for two for sure, or 3 for sure. I don't know, 6 total.
7.
Okay.
Kirk Ferentz, Iowa. Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State. Kyle Whittingham, Utah. Dabo Sweeney, Clemson. This is the guy that you wouldn't get. Dave Doran at NC State.
Yeah.
Mark Stoops at Kentucky, who now everybody thinks is going to get fired. And James Franklin at Penn State, who's a year ahead of Narduzzi. So, like, Narduzzi's locked in. And the thing I think to watch here for Pitt, Randy Bates, good veteran defensive coordinator. Cade Bell, new offensive coordinator. We've talked about him a lot on this show. And I think they're going to figure it out a little bit better in year 2. Like, they got a little hot last year, coming out hot with a little bit of a go-go offense that, like, didn't necessarily, I think, serve them that well when the offensive line injuries hit and when Eli Holstein started running around and getting injured. They fired their AD last year, and they've hired Alan Green as the new AD, who came from Tennessee, where he was like an assistant AD there. He had been the AD at Auburn before. They want to make sure they're in good shape for NIL and like the modern world of college football. And so that doesn't mean that I think like Pat Narduzzi is going to get fired, but I think like it means like Pitt is modernizing. And the point that I made a million times last year is I think Pat Narduzzi is modernizing. So I like both these staffs. I like the plan that both these schools have. I'm not sure where to go here with coaches because I don't have a ton of criticisms of the way these schools are going about it for either coaching staff.
Nor do I. Narduzzi has more longevity as a college head coach, obviously, and I guess in that respect, more success. Bill O'Brien's been a head coach for 10 years in college and the NFL, and he has had a winning record in 8 of those 10 years. So, like, he's a good coach. I would, for as much I was a little bit out on Narduzzi going into last year, which I think I expressed. And part of it was like, I wonder if he's a little too set in his ways. And then like they bring in Cade Bell, they start to push the envelope a little bit offensively. I do think he is more forward thinking than you would give a, let's just call it what it is, like an older coach when it comes to, at least I'm going to call him old, like a guy who's just been around for a while. When it comes to like the NIL stuff. Yeah. It's not like he's 80. So like I was probably a little too hot with like being out on Narduzzi going into last year, and I've tried to pull back on that some. I would probably lean Narduzzi only because like whatever his culture is more set in at Pitt than O'Brien's is at BC, and Narduzzi, had that season a couple of years ago when they had Kenny Pickett and won the ACC, and Bill O'Brien doesn't really have that on his college resume. So I would give a slight lean to Pitt.
I mean, Bill O'Brien's also a playoff coach in the NFL. So it's like, you get a guy like that. Let's do this. Let's give the offensive line to BC officially as we give coaching to Pitt. Okay. Intangibles. I will just say one of the things is that Pitt lost their kicker, Ben Sauls, who was 6 of 7 on field goals of 50 yards or more last year, and had like a tude and would just like nail 55 yarders and be like, what's up? And so they did bring in a kicker, James London from Murray State. Ben Sauls was 6 of 7 on 50 yarders last year. James London was 6 of 9. He was first team all Missouri Valley Conference at the FCS level. So Pitt's going to have a big booming kicker. And then like the schedule's okay. There's 3, they play 3 of the good ACC teams. They're at Louisville. And then their end of the season is they have a bye week in their last 3 games. They're home against Notre Dame, at Georgia Tech, home against Miami. So Pitt has a chance to shape the playoff race. Playing Notre Dame and Miami that late in the year. But then like I think they should be in a good spot, right? Like new AD, they're trying. I think they built the roster the right way. The main thing is that they lost their last 6 games last year. They went 7-0, and then they went 0-6. And does that linger at all? But I don't necessarily think it does. So, like, what's the BC? And then it's Duquesne, Central Michigan, and then they get West Virginia at home and a complete rebuild under Rich Rod. Yeah. So the brawl's always awesome, but they have a good chance to be 3-0 into a bye week and then come out at Louisville. And Louisville's going to be good. But I think you can stare at this schedule, and the 5.5 win total seems low to me. I think you can stare at this schedule and get to 8. Like without, if you think I think I've outlined, I'd like a lot of their roster. I think you can look at this and be much more at 7 and 8 than at 5.5 for a win total.
Yeah, I guess I don't quite feel that same way about Boston College with its similar or exact same win total. One like intangible thing with like BC was like the worst punting team in the country last year. They were 94th in special team, 94th in special teams efficiency. They brought in a true freshman punter from Ireland. So, like that's kind of interesting. And another guy from Yale to like try to address that. But I think maybe BC could do itself some favors with like field position that might help it this year. Schedule I think is actually is pretty tough. I had a hard time like finding 6 wins to get to the over 5.5 that I felt really good about. Okay. Michigan State in week 2 on the road at night is a tough road game. BC won that game last year. I would pick Michigan State to win that game right now. I think play at Pitt on October 4th, play Clemson on October 11th. Like they get of the teams that are viewed as being at the top of the ACC, BC has to play Clemson. That's at home. They play at Louisville. And they play SMU, and then they also draw Notre Dame. Now, 3 of those 4 are home games, which is nice. They also play Georgia Tech at home. They actually have a very good home schedule. But I don't know that BC is going to win any of those games is the problem. Also play at Syracuse. Like there's no let up here in the schedule. Like they open with Fordham, you win that. The 3rd game is at Stanford, which is in shambles. You would hope you can win that. You hope you can beat Cal to get you to 3 wins, and then like UConn should get you to 4, and then I don't think there's anything guaranteed as a win beyond that. So I think a winning record is going to be really tough, and even like 5 wins I think could be a bit of a struggle for BC this year.
So it sounds like schedule intangibles to Pitt as well. That means quarterback Pitt, skill Pitt, offensive line BC, close. Defensive front 7, definitely Pitt. Secondary BC. Coaches Pitt, intangibles Pitt, 5-2 Pitt. Same win total at 5.5. I think pretty convincingly you'd rather be Pitt in 2025.
Yes, I agree.
but give me the start of the Dylan Lonergan era at BC and the beginning of Bill O'Brien starting a quarterback factory in Chestnut Hill, and I am here for it. And if this is the beginning of that and a 5-win season is in service of that, I think that's a version of success for BC.
I think so. If Bill O'Brien can get this team to like 6-6 in a bowl game with that schedule and the roster turning over in some pretty important spots, I would consider that a successful season.
The team last year that I was like, man, they have an awesome home schedule. This is going to be great for these fans. I can't wait for this year was West Virginia for me. It was like all these fun games that then they all lost and their coach got fired. So like Bill O'Brien's not going to get fired, but it could be, it's fun to play good opponents at home, but it's not fun to get beaten by good opponents at home. All right. That's our KOTN Showdown. We're taking Pitt. When we come back, what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, give us a thumbs up, write a review, tell a friend. Thanks for being part of KOTN. Ask KOTN@gmail.com. Comment on the show. Send us your suggestions for Whatcha. Our shows are jam-packed, Landis. So I got to carve out more time for reader comments and responses. And we're going to do that. We're not going to really do much of it today because I want to know what you're watching.
So I took a trip to South Florida over the weekend, and I didn't take great advantage of the opportunity on the planes to watch new stuff. There wasn't anything there flying on Delta that like really struck me as like something I wanted to watch in terms of movies. So I ended up like watching Parks and Rec in the office on all of my flights, which was a reminder because I hadn't really checked in with either in a while. Was a reminder of like they're just like perfect comedies. Like I understand The Office kind of fizzled out at the end when Steve Carell left, but it wasn't like the worst ending I've seen from a show. But otherwise, just like really well done comedies, and like got me excited for The Paper, which is like made by the same people, which I don't even know when that's coming out. But then I was also reminded like Greg Daniels, the guy that created Parks and Rec and helped create the US version of The Office, also made that terrible show Space Force that was on Netflix with Steve Carell. So like he's not batting 1,000. He also made King of the Hill with Mike Judge, which I was unaware of. So like 3 bangers, 1 stinker. And I think I left like watching those 2 shows on my flights and checking the track record, and then now suddenly going from being excited about The Paper to being nervous about The Paper because I feel like the universe wants to balance it out and give Greg Daniels another stinker.
I do think, though, local government, Northeastern Pennsylvania, local government in Indiana, Northeastern Pennsylvania Paper Company. The paper's set in Ohio? Is it not?
Toledo. Yeah, Toledo.
The paper's set in Toledo. Versus High Concept Space Force. I think they tried too hard of like, we want to do a workplace comedy, but we want the workplace to be somewhere crazy. And then Steve Carell, for some reason, decided, I'm going to talk like this and have a scratchy voice the whole time. And it's like, just be Steve Carell. We love you. Right. It doesn't matter if you're Michael Scott of Rocket People. We want that. Don't have a scratchy voice. So I think they tried too hard. So I think you should feel good about a reversion back to a simpler workplace, which I think should have an opportunity to hit more of those Parks and Rec office vibes.
Okay. I'm also excited for like being able to relate to it as someone who has spent some time in newsrooms. So I don't know if that'll enhance or make me more critical of it, but I'm interested to find that out whenever that show begins.
It's also for people like us who have come through that to be like, I can't wait to watch a show about the death of journalism.
That's true, because I think that I think I was reading about it more yesterday, and it's like a paper that's trying to save itself with like volunteer reporters. It's like, boy, that's a bleak existence. No one's getting paid. They're trying to save this paper.
This used to be a job.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I won't watch. Maybe I don't need reminders about our dying business. My wife and I got through the 7 Mission Impossible movies.
Nice.
So we finished our homework. So now we are allowed to go watch it in the theater. I don't even know if it's still in the theater, but it took us this long to get through the 7. And in conclusion, we did not need to watch like the first 5 or so that feel like they have nothing to do with this. But for anybody who has not seen the Mission Impossible that's in the theaters yet, and I guess everybody knows this, but it is a second part of the movie right before it. And to our credit, if you have not seen that one, I think you would go into the one that's in the theaters now and be like, what is happening? Because it's just a second part of the movie. So our efforts were not in vain. So we did it. But Landis, I think my conclusion on this is the number one thing that I want from a movie is not knowing what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's a Tom Cruise spy movie over 25 decades, and I don't know what happens in the one in the theaters, but, you know, in the one that happened in 2004, I was like, I don't know. Is Tom Cruise going to win this fight against this bad guy? Or is he going to get stabbed in the neck with a pen? It's like, no, he's going to win. And there's just a part of it like that. It's like, duh. But also there are some people who I think are very thrilled by the familiarity, the fight sequences, movie stardom, cool stuff. And it just was a reminder for me, my funny, whether it's a comedy or an action movie or a drama or a thriller, I want to be not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And that's for the first 7 in Mission Impossibles. It was kind of hard. It's like, are the good spies going to win?
Well, if you want to watch them in real time, you could have gotten you kind of screwed yourself there by watching all true. 6 or 7, whatever it was. Kind of eliminated the suspense there.
Yeah, no, I guess that is on me. But would I have gone into each Mission Impossible like in 2006 being like, I don't know, when he jumps off the cliff on the motorcycle, maybe this is the time the parachute doesn't open? Is that what I would have been thinking?
Probably
this is
not.
The one where he's hanging onto the plane outside the door of the plane by his fingernails. And this is the one where he lets go and plunges to his death. Would I really have thought that? Is that what the audience is back then? In 2013, when you saw in the trailer that Tom Cruise is standing on a pogo stick on a rocket ship to the moon, were you like, I think he might fall off the pogo stick? Or were you like, well, no, he's definitely going to stay on the pogo stick. He's Tom Cruise. Like that's, I don't know.
Well, maybe. I don't know. It's like in the previews, they were saying like in the third of what will be 8 movies. Like you don't know what exactly the longevity is going to be. So I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Do you care? Like, do you want uncertainty in movies, or are you good with like, I know what's going to happen, but I'm entertained? Which is no. I'm not saying that's probably on me more than a regular audience member.
Like there are just so few instances of like the main person in a movie like that meeting their end that I never go into it with that default. So I always sort of have an understanding of like, okay, this is eventually going to work itself out. So I get more engaged with how than like the actual result of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What are you eating?
I had sushi tacos over the weekend, and they were fine. Like it wasn't the most it wasn't the best thing I've ever had. It was good. It was like it was tuna. It wasn't even like real sushi. It was like, well, it wasn't, it was fine. But the thing I appreciated about it was that the vessel for the taco was they took the seaweed that normally wraps sushi and they deep fried it. They like put it in tempura and fried it so that it was like more, it was less forgiving than seaweed would be otherwise, and like was sturdy enough to hold all the toppings in there and like not crumble apart necessarily. And I just appreciated the ingenuity that went into developing a new food vessel, because I never would have thought of deep frying seaweed to make it resemble a hard taco shell and then filling that hard taco shell with tuna and rice and other typical sushi accoutrement. It was good.
Coming to a state fair near you. Deep fried seaweed.
Deep fried seaweed.
That's I mean, what else, right?
Yeah.
Deep fried Twinkie, deep fried Oreo, deep fried Reese's peanut butter cup, deep fried seaweed. Maybe dip it in chocolate then at the end too.
One of these things is not like the other. Yeah.
Yeah. Vessel appreciation, I think, is a very important part of Kings of the North. Right?
Yeah.
Food vessel appreciation. That'd be a good off-season show. We're in the middle of the off-season right now. We're going 4 hours talking about college football. So like we don't have time for off-season shenanigans, but create a new food vessel. That feels like a good 3rd grade project, right? They're always doing like invention convention or whatever, like in elementary school. My kids did that. It's like invent something new. Make it specifically invent a new food vessel.
You're inviting some, I don't know, some danger there with letting children figure out what is edible and what isn't.
That's true.
Here's my new food vessel. It's glue.
I wrapped this chicken finger in a leaf and then I ate it. I don't know what it was a leaf to. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's about it. And we'll cut that part out. Japanese steakhouse went with the family last night. Typically it is a special occasion place because it's not cheap. But also, this is one of those that I'm very cognizant of this. Like as prices increase elsewhere, I think it was like $27 for your chicken, steak, vegetables, rice meal at the Japanese steakhouse that we went to in Central Ohio. So that's a lot of money. Like that is not, we don't go spend $27 per entree without a second thought, right? That's Father's Day, birthday, which is why we end up at those places a lot. So I just be on alert though. So like, if you're going out to eat and your meal starts to leak, because that's the thing with like meals, right? You can just, I'm gonna get chicken fingers, but then I'll get an extra side, and then I'm gonna get a drink, and then if Japanese steakhouse, you drink water. If you start approaching where it's like, well, I spent $23 on this meal that was kind of just whatever, then get yourself to a Japanese steakhouse because does it ever fail? Does it ever fail? It's a sodium bomb. It's just soaked in butter and oil. But I don't know that I've ever had a bad Japanese steakhouse meal.
I'm trying to think. I think I've only ever had 2 Japanese steakhouse meals in my life, which feels like it's not enough, clearly. But
get yourself over
I enjoy both times. Yeah, I enjoy both times.
Yeah. So
do you hit a Benihana or do you hit like a local? Yeah, local.
Yeah. It's cheaper. The one that we go to is trapped in the 70s. Like the decorations are the 70s. You walk over a little bridge over water when you go inside. It's great. We love it. But Benihana, you're paying like Benihana, you're not getting for $27. You're probably creeping into the 30s. But if you can find your local Japanese steakhouse that keeps it under 30, just be aware of other leakage and then get yourself over there. And if it's a celebration, if it's Father's Day, if it's Mother's Day, if it's your birthday, get yourself there.
Yeah.
You need to be there more than twice in your life. I'm a little surprised by that.
We didn't have, I mean, I'm unaware of a Benihana in Philadelphia, at least when I was growing up. So there was like like local place we went to, I think for my birthday one year. And then I think when I was older, I went to a Benihana somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Find your local one. I'll give you the address of this one. You'll like it. What are you thinking about?
I did my thinking already. It was being angry at Stephen Godfrey for jocking our style until I saw that he had interviewed you in Athlon Magazine.
I have not read the whole thing. I stopped when I was quoted in the first quote. How many times was I quoted? Did you read the whole thing?
I think 2 or 3, and then there's like a couple anonymous staff quotes in there. One from the SEC that says like you're wrong, and one from the Big Ten. It's like, yeah, we're better. So it was good.
Oh, good, good. Oh, okay. Now I'm going to find out who that SEC person is and hit him with my.
Do you want to read you the SEC quote?
Yeah. Read me the SEC quote. Thank you, Athlon, for furthering the conversation, and thank you, Stephen Godfrey, for the invitation for the interview.
It's the kicker quote. I wouldn't rush to judgment after one playoff selection, one SEC coordinator says. But if you look at their league and our league and take the best, most complete roster leaving the spring, it's probably Texas against Penn State. A few years ago, that would have been Saban or Kirby. It would have been a Saban or Kirby Smart team with a significant advantage. I think Penn State and Texas right now would be pretty close, and that's saying something. So there's a little bit of mission there.
Oh yeah,
changing world. Yeah,
that from an SEC staffer.
Yeah,
that's incriminating. Do you know what it took for them to say that? Oh my God. Oh, they know it. Go read that story. They know it. Have you been on a jet ski?
One time. I didn't like it. I felt like I was out of control, and I had to have someone drive me back on the jet ski.
Oh no,
as a passenger.
It's one of my bucket list items that I want to go on a jet ski, but I want to know do I have to be the type of guy who wears a sleeveless shirt to ride a jet ski? Or can I be a Kohl's plaid shirt kind of guy and ride a jet ski? Is there a jet ski culture that I am not prepared for? Because I think there's probably a motorcycle culture, and this is saying that like I'm not cool enough to ride a motorcycle, and I know that. But does that mean that I'm not cool enough to ride a jet ski? Or is jet ski culture open to kind of lame 51-year-old guys who don't know what they're doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm not to speak generally because I don't drive a motorcycle, but I think you do have to be a certain type of person to ride a motorcycle. A bit more of a daredevil maybe to ride a motorcycle than you do to ride a jet ski. Because you can make like riding a jet ski can be a little more leisurely, I think, if you want it to be. I just didn't know how to control the thing, so I felt like I was going a million miles an hour. I was also young. I was like 16. Probably shouldn't have been driving it in the first place. Yeah.
Okay. I really want to do it. And I'm just less afraid of everything on water, which probably I'm a little too less afraid. It's like, it's water. It's fine. But it's like, you can still hurt yourself on water, right? And then also you can
drown. You hit the water hard enough, it feels like concrete.
Yeah. That's the thing that I don't take into account enough. Okay. I really want to do it. But I think I better do it because I'm not sure that a 67-year-old first-time jet skier is what anybody wants. So it's kind of time for Doug to get on this thing, right?
You should go up to Lake Erie. I'm sure there's places where you can rent a jet ski.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a video of it because some people just love to, like on their sports accounts, just love to put pictures of themselves on vacation. I don't usually do that, but like maybe I'll do that. And like, maybe I will be sleeveless. Athlon magazine. Oh, John says he hates jet skis. They think they own whatever lake you're on. I wouldn't think that. I would be very cautious on my jet ski.
It's the dirt bike of the water, so I get that. Yeah. We were we rented a boat and like went to a sandbar in Fort Lauderdale and we're like hanging out there, and there were people buzzing around on jet skis in a way that I thought was disruptive to the vibes. So I get that.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like I am not, so the dirt bike of the water is like, I'm not a dirt bike guy. I would not be capable of being a dirt bike guy. But then can I be a jet ski guy? Is a jet ski slightly more welcoming? That's what I need to know.
It's a good question. My inclination is yes, but I'm not an expert, so I can't say that.
If we have any jet ski experts who are watching and listening, ask KOTN@gmail.com. Please give us information. And if your information is, dear God, Doug, don't do it for your own good and for ours, stay off a jet ski, I will listen to that. Thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, who actually wasn't here today, but he did all the work ahead of time. And then Bill was the show producer. How'd it go, Bill?
I think we did okay. I think I pressed all the buttons the time that I was supposed to.
Oh, well done. Thanks to you guys for being here live in the YouTube chat, watching back on YouTube, listening back on podcasts. We're ever so grateful for you guys being part of what we're doing here on Northern College Football. More KOTN showdowns ahead, more plans about other things ahead. We'll see you next Monday and next Wednesday. And for now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.